Hello, everyone. Welcome to Their Journey, a sit down with the National Digest. I'm your host, Eric Mastrota, and today I have the pleasure of once again speaking with Marilyn Redmond. For those who are new here, Marilyn was actually our guest on our first episode of this podcast, which I highly recommend pausing this one now and going to watch before you embark on this one. And what a joy it is to take on this new journey with her and her amazing story. Marilyn is truly the epitome of finding strength during life's darkest moments and spinning it into gold to give back to others. Her willingness to share her story and the lessons she's learned through not only platforms like this, but through her work as a counselor, medium, spiritual minister, author, and so much more is very inspiring. Today, we're going to be talking even more about the deep changes that come from inner transformation, and we also have some viewer submitted questions sprinkled throughout our conversation as well. So, without further ado, hi, Marilyn, welcome back. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing very well, and I'm glad to be back.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much again for joining us once again. We're really excited. And, to get us started, I wanted to talk about these terms, love-based life and a fear-based life. And we'll start with the first one. So, for you and in your professional opinion, what does it mean to live a love-based life? And how can someone who's maybe in a dark situation begin that journey of living a love-based life?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's what all our lives are about, is to move out of the darkness into the light of the creation that created us, which is love and light, which is the same vibration. It's the highest vibrations of creation in the universe, and we're all part of it. But we have been conditioned to be in the darkness by our culture, religion, government, etc. And coming out of the darkness of that programming and moving into the light brings the reality of who we really are and what life is really about.
Mm,
And so the darkness is the illusion. We think we're living our lives, you know, but we have been some of our messages are very, very deep, and they actually come from eons of history. And to release that darkness takes time and consciousness and awareness, and so it's a bumpy road.
mhm, right.
And sometimes, when we get into the good places, we get to enjoy it because that means there's space for more goodness to come in, and the old has to leave, the fear-based life that we have been living. And the fear is fear of the unknown,
Mm,
and we have been programmed to fear love.
mm,
So as we move out of the fear, we're going to transform it into a love base. And what we do is individually identify the situations that are our fear and what is it fearful of. And when we realize with turning the light on, the fear leaves and we get the answers of truth that we always wanted. But we've been taught not to look to our hearts, which is where our answers come from. And instead of other people, experts, and so forth, we have been taught to look outside ourselves. And that's the illusion.
mm.
Actually, what we're looking at is other people's problems being projected onto us. And it isn't our problem, it's their problem. So when we turn the light on it and see that we really are loving, wonderful people, we're magnificent in the eyes of the Creator. And we have that love that we can open our hearts, release the fear that blocked it, and that love can enter our hearts. And as we feel self-esteem, as we feel self-love, then we can share it with others. We can't share with somebody what we don't have.
Right.
We're just sharing our fear with someone, projecting our fear onto somebody else. That's a fear-based life, and it goes through families.
Mm, mm,
So when you grew up, in my case, in a just very, very dysfunctional family,
yeah.
um, all I knew was fear, and I didn't know there was another way to look at life.
Mm,
And as I identified each of these things and replaced them with love and grace, I actually was meditating at Death Valley.
mm,
And for the first time in my life, I felt grace. And I said, I want more. And so I was never really reluctant to continue, you might say, sorting out the truth from the false. And now I can live in the truth instead of the darkness of fear and the illusion, and come into reality and the love of who and what life's all about.
yeah. Amazing. And you touched on my next question. Speaking of that fear-based life, I am curious how you did and how someone could find that courage to break free from the fear-based life that you were just describing.
Well, it's a challenge and it's a commitment. And the problem with the fear-based life, in my case, and in many people's cases, is we've been separating ourselves from the consciousness that creates life with the fear, and we're going to die eventually.
Mm,
That's what illness is all about, is our separation from the love within which created us. So when I was in a car, I was in a marriage that was domestic violence, and he was driving very erratic because he was very angry, and he was going to show me. And so he was all over the road, and we almost had 3 head-on collisions. And I said, God, please help me. I really don't want to die.
mm,
So when you ask the universe to help you, it jumps in.
mm.
But you have to do the work inside of yourself that had been blocking it from working in your life. So my Paradigm Busters book has the details of how to identify the things that stop the love and the light of the universe from operating in your heart. And so you can move into that love-based life. And it's a step-by-step process. And you don't jump into reality and all the love and the unconditional love of the universe with one big magic wand. I wish I had a magic wand. Because it would blow your circuits. You're
Mm.
not able to take on all that love all at once, and you'd be in a mental hospital.
Yeah.
So you have to do it step by step. And I've been in many step programs teaching me the basics of which steps I needed for my situation. And so gradually, I was trying suicide at one point to get out of that crazy marriage,
Mm,
and he was trying to kill me. And I've come up with the answers of why all this came together. It was my path in life to learn how to move into love. And so today I have an understanding, and I can appreciate those dark times were actually, and the people involved were actually my teachers to make it so bad I had to turn to the light for help.
right.
And it's a commitment to do that.
Definitely, definitely. And along those lines, I'm going to bring us to our first viewer submitted question from Angela from California. She is asking, how can I shift my mindset from fear to love, specifically after coming out of a toxic environment?
Well, that's a good question, Angela. Um, I needed guidance to do that.
Mm,
And as I referred, I went to 12-step programs. Now there's two things you need to address. And one is, are you still in the toxic situation, wanting to stay there in that environment? So, but move out of your head into your heart while you're there.
right.
That's part of the issue. The other part is, can you move out of that toxic environment and create a healthy community?
Mm,
So if you're in a difficult, I was in my marriage for 5 years trying to do that physically, stay in a situation that was toxic, and I'm trying to grow out of it. And I learned what I needed to learn. In my case, I was shut down at the age of 3, and it took me 5 years to get enough self-empowerment to be able to actually have a divorce and get out of he actually moved out of the house. So I was no longer in the toxic environment and could then really grow.
mm,
I just was in a survival state while I was in that house with him. I
mm,
needed space and healthy people around me to support me. I didn't come from a loving family, and to learn to create my own loving family has taken a long time. And I don't create crazy men anymore.
mm. Definitely. Great. Yeah. So, speaking of that as well, and speaking of removing yourself from that toxic environment, how can someone who has come out of a toxic situation or environment begin to trust themselves, their inner knowledge, and their higher consciousness as well once they're out?
That's a tough question,
Mm,
was for me anyway,
mm,
because I didn't know how to trust.
Yeah.
When I made the decision to move out of the fear and get healthy, I didn't realize I had mental illness, all kinds of, addictions, um, all kinds of problems I had to overcome to get out of the fear-based life I had. And I couldn't trust my family because they weren't trustworthy.
Mm.
So that was, for me, trust was basically a new word. And along with trust goes faith. And I went to church for 50 years and never heard the word faith.
Mm.
I mean, I was a little 3-year-old, right?
Right.
It just went over my head
Yeah.
in those days. I know now that whatever they were talking about, I wasn't there, so to speak. So even though I sat in the pew, I was dying inside.
Mm.
And learning to trust was really tough. Um, as I got into 12-step programs, they say you need a sponsor.
Right.
And if your problems come from childhood, I was told to go to ACA. And if you're in relationship problems, I was told to go to Al Anon. And
Mm.
if you have addictions yourself, which I had through the doctor's prescription addicted me, I was to go to AA. Now, in those groups, you have sponsors, people who have been in the program long enough to help you and guide you in the steps necessary to move out yourself.
Mm.
That was the first person I ever trusted.
Mm.
I couldn't trust my mother. I knew how, I didn't know what it was called in those days. Crazy over my head. My mother was mentally ill. She was never honest. We didn't have any communication. There was no trust, no talk, and no feelings in my family.
Mm.
So I couldn't trust her because I knew I wasn't getting answers I was supposed to get. So I learned not to trust my family. But finding a person that was doing what I wanted to do and had success in doing it, I learned to trust. And from that, I learned to trust not just one woman, which was my sponsor, but women. I thought you couldn't trust any woman.
Mm.
We generalize, and I know today you don't do that. So your trust grows as you get support and help, and those people ahead of you that have been there have answers that work. And so when you discover they work, they become trustworthy, and you learn to sort out the people who aren't trustworthy.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Again, along those lines, speaking of those programs and addiction, we have a question from Greg from Georgia who asked, what advice do you have when it comes to taking that first step in overcoming the complex and deep struggles of an addiction?
Well, that is a good question. Um, it's really honesty with self.
Mm.
We want to look good to others. We have a mask.
Mhm.
I was a teacher. I looked good for my many years of teaching in the public schools, and I also taught in colleges and whatever, and spiritual groups now. And I always looked good, but it was not real. It wasn't from my heart.
Mm.
I never was taught to listen to my heart. I was taught to look good, and my mother sewed beautiful clothes for me, so I looked good.
Mhm.
And so what I discovered is honesty is the best policy. And when I got into the programs uh, through treatment, um, I learned that the first step in recovery was honesty. I
Mm.
had to get out of the denial. See, in my case, I had a lot of denial because I wanted to look good. And in the 40s, the radio, all we had was radio then. And there was a radio called Let's Pretend.
Mm.
And I pretended my whole life that I was just fine, thank you.
Yeah.
And I had to give up being fine and get real.
Yeah.
So I gave up the let's pretend, and I took off the rose colored glasses. Like, if you saw what was really going on, you wouldn't like me. So I always never talked about what wasn't good. I just
Right.
didn't take anybody home. And so it's about honesty.
Mm.
And as you get honest, you start replacing the truth with the false, where you haven't been honest with yourself. The problem is we have been living from our egos, edging God out, or higher power, universal creator, however you determine to label that energy. And when you're not being honest, you're not in reality, and your life goes downhill very well. And so it's basically being as positive as you could be. I thought everything was terrible, horrible, and awful, and it would always be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect segue into our next viewer submitted question, because a common thread of something that we're talking about a lot is the relationship that we have with ourselves and improving it. So we have a question from Amanda from Massachusetts who asks, what advice do you have for someone who does feel unworthy or stuck in a cycle of self-doubt?
Well, self-doubt is a part of fear. Fear has many, many labels, and it keeps us away from the truth of who we are. And self-doubt is doubting yourself that you have the answers within. And so again, faith and trust, you have to start trusting yourself. And that was really tough for me because I was a fence sitter. And if I took any action that was wrong, oh my goodness, doom was going to happen. And so I just sat on the fence. So what I had to understand is every step forward I take with loving intentions is going to bring the better results. And my sponsor had me, love and worry are self-doubt and worry are basically the same thing. And she had me write out, worry is a well, that we're blocking God out when we worry or have self-doubt. So I had to trust, that's where trust comes in. I had to trust my inner self. And when I learned to trust my inner self, I found answers I never listened to. I was not taught in church to listen to myself and inner self. In fact, I was taught that was the voice of the devil. Well, I know now from a religious point of view, the devil was in my ego, edging God out. And my heart is where the love and grace has always been. But I was afraid in my case to open up my heart. I was afraid of love. And so if you trust yourself, you will move out of that cycle because you have the power. You just thought you didn't. You've been trained not to think you do.
Yeah.
You know, do as I tell you. And I have the all, see, we've been taught to look to the experts in religion, and government tells us how to live our lives. Everybody tells us how to live our lives. You go to the doctors, they tell you how to live your life.
Right.
Well, actually, they tell you how to die if you want to know the truth. But the point is, I had to learn to trust myself and get rid of the doubt by replacing it with who I truly am, open up my heart and start feeling good. I did not know how to feel good. And I didn't know that it was okay to feel good. In my family, they were so in depression. Hush, hush, Marilyn, don't get too happy. So I was conditioned not to feel good. And so like in treatment, they said, well, why do you take the pills? And I says, oh, to be normal. I didn't know how to feel, how to trust myself or be normal.
Right.
And trusting yourself is the most normal thing you can do. So changing your consciousness that you were created in love, you are love, always have been loved, and somebody told you that that wasn't true. And I don't go to those places anymore. I don't consider myself religious. I don't go to groups that are abusive or negative. I have found spiritual groups of people that are positive, supportive, and caring. And I've trusting myself to each time take another step. And I found a spiritual group besides 12 steps that really helped me to find answers of who I really am. And I can trust myself, and other people will support me in that. So it's a matter of one step by one step, do the next right indicated thing, and you'll be drawn into places that will be supportive so you can trust yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah. And thinking back to those first beginning moments and steps of your own healing, we have a question from Juliet from New York who asks, what steps did you take to begin the process of overcoming some of the traumas that you experienced?
Very good question, Juliet. Overcoming the traumas you
Mm,
experienced. Well, we one by one, I started going to psychiatrists for help. I needed
mm,
lots of help in those days. And I would start talking with him. And I, like I said, no talk, no trust, no feelings. It was the first time I ever expressed myself. My stepdad slapped me in the face when I asked a question.
mm,
Don't talk back to your elders, I was told. And another time he said, well, we don't want to hear what you have to say.
mm,
That was the first time I ever could express myself, was at the psychiatrist's office, and I paid bucks for him to listen to me. I had a person who would listen.
mm,
In my family, there was no communication.
mm,
I didn't even know how to talk. And when I had gone to treatment, the first meeting that we had, which was like a therapy meeting, only they didn't call it that. And we were to talk about ourselves and our situation and our problems. And everybody went around the room, and there were about 24 people in there. And they talked about the situations. And when they got to me, I talked about the weather and my job and what I didn't, after the meeting, they came over and they said, you got to talk about yourself tomorrow.
mm,
I didn't know what to say.
mm,
I'd never talked in my family. It wasn't acceptable. First time in my, well, besides I want to live and not die in the car problem, I said, God, you're going to have to put the words in my mouth because I don't have a clue what to say.
mm,
And that's how I've lived the rest of my life. I pray that God will talk through me because I don't have the answers.
mm,
Um, so the process of coming into healthiness was, I had to learn to talk and express who my feelings. And I never had a feeling. I went through, well, until I was in my 50s, I was the walking dead. I didn't have a feeling in the world
mm,
until I learned to talk to the psychiatrist, and I learned to talk in the 12-step meetings, and I learned to talk to my sponsor and could trust her. And that was my first steps out,
mm,
is to start expressing myself. And my sponsor would listen to me by the hour. I used to say she had ears of iron
mm,
because I finally got unbottled, and like the Coke bottle, when you shake it and you
mm,
take the cork out and it go, I was out of the bottle, and I could finally talk. And over time, as I was talking, the other things I needed to say and had never said started coming out. So start communicating with a healthy person, sharing who you really are and not your facade.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. And you kind of just answered my next question too, because, when we're talking about this sense of self too, and again, talking with yourself, I'm wondering from your perspective, how can someone connect with their higher consciousness sense of self while they're dealing with the chaos of an abusive and or toxic environment?
Well, that's a toughie because I was still in my marriage, as I said, for 5 years.
Yeah.
Still a pretty sick cookie.
Mhm.
Took actually several years after that before I actually woke up.
Mm,
So how do you start dealing with situations when you're in a toxic situation? In domestic violence, the problems happen at night because you're home. You're not in work jobs anymore
right.
during the daytime. So life would go crazy at night. And at about 2 in the morning, I'd be on the phone with my sponsor. And the first thing she would say out of her mouth was, focus on Marilyn. What does Marilyn want?
Mm,
I had always focused on my husband for my needs because I was a very needy person, and I didn't know how to do anything because I was still emotionally 3 years old, and here I'm a 50-year-old, right?
mm,
So I was always focusing on And it's called codependency. And that's what religion teaches is codependency. You focus on somebody to save you.
Mm.
And I got in myself in situations where I needed to be saved, and I got married to be look good to the public and not be an unwed mother. And so I put myself in a lot of places to look good, and they were to save me. I wanted my parents to save me. I wanted my parents to love me. I'm looking for love in all the wrong places.
Mm.
The love is within me, and my sponsor helped me focus on me, the love that was in me. It's not about the toxic people around you. They're playing their part for you to choose to find the love within yourself. If they're not loved people themselves, they can't love you. They're shedding off all their ugliness onto you, all their problems, and you take it on like a sponge.
Mm.
So as a little kid watched my dad beat up my mom, one of my biggest fears was physical harm. I didn't want to have physical harm. And guess what? In my marriage, I brought it with me because I still had that message in my thinking because I didn't know you could get rid of it. I didn't know you could change your thinking in those days.
Yeah.
But as you focus on yourself and you come from your heart, the other person is going to be upset because they won't have power over you anymore.
Yeah.
So as I went to Al-Anon and started gaining my power, my husband started leaving the house.
Mm.
I was gaining my own self-empowerment, and he was losing control of me, and so he tried to hang on even deeper and deeper. He didn't want to lose control. That's what's going on with the government.
Mm.
Anyway, so we play it out in our own lives. And so gradually things got so bad with his controlling getting so much worse. I just finally said to him, "You're out of here, and don't come back."
Mm.
And what I discovered is he was a psychopath. When you're that sick, you can't take in love, and he always blocked it. And he's trying to get love from me, but he's blocked being able to do that with his emotions. And I discovered it's like oil and vinegar. So if somebody's really toxic and you're trying to get well, you're not going to match.
Mm. No.
You're not going to be able to have a relationship. So I found out that I could, in my changing into being a loving person and away from the toxic people, that I could accept love from other people and they weren't going to be abusive like I was in that marriage. So learning to focus on yourself, and what the other people are doing is none of your business. And what
Mm.
they tell you is none of your business. They're just spouting off their anger.
Right.
And you don't have to take it on
Mm.
because you're a child of God. You're a child of the universe. You were created in love. It's their problem. And we took it on ourselves as our problem. So
Mm.
when you focus on yourself, you are not taking on their problem and you're free of it. You're
Yeah.
no longer their victim or hostage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and going right off of that and even thinking back to what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation with the love-based or fear-based life, I'm wondering from your perspective also, how can someone recognize and then break free from that cultural programming that keeps them in a fear-based life or oppression as well?
Well, it's a mind change. You know, what we're talking about is various forms of disease. We're at dis-ease. And when I read that in the big book of AA, I said, I want to be at ease. And what I discovered is I was told you have to change everything in your life.
Mm.
Everything. That's why I'm no longer religious. So I had to find answers that were positive, loving, um, and groups that would support that. And I no longer have an environment around me. I have created a new family
Mm.
through prayer. I've learned to pray for all those people because they were playing their parts and did very well. So, but we can come back together in love. So as you leave those people, you find healthy groups to support you in a new you create a new family until, in my case, it took 40 years, but you
Mm,
create a new family until your old family changes. If they don't change, that's their problem. They're the ones that are missing out. God bless them. They're probably doing the best they can from the childhood they had. They were living their childhood through you, and you don't have to relive their immaturity, is what it is all about. So when you find new groups of people, you have a supportive, loving family. And from that, you can actually, in my case, it's taken years. Some people do it right away. I'm the slow variety kind.
mm,
But you can change your family as you change yourself. And as you look out and see the loving, supportive people, then you are sending that love out to your original family. And that's what they were lacking, was love.
mm.
And they will come around. When people feel safe, they can change. It took me 50 some years to figure out I had to change. And I have now created a family returning to me. It's taken all these years of lots and lots of prayer for them. They were really needy of prayer, but it can happen. Just don't get impatient.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, to close us off, I want to ask something and revisit two amazing points that you made in this conversation. One about how we all grow up surrounded by these systems that are telling us what to do and how to live our lives, whether it be family, school, religion, doctors, the government, etc. And how you mentioned that trusting yourself is one of the most normal things that you can do. So, what steps can a person take in the beginning to start to move beyond societal expectations to find their own truth and inevitably trust themselves?
Good question. It's a very, in my case, very slow process.
Yeah.
Um, my book, Paradigm Busters, has the process step by step of how you do that. And the first step, as I mentioned, was to get honest. And the second step is to identify where you are, where your ego's running the show, your head's running the show, everybody else is running your show, and they have power over you. And it's to say, okay, to your higher power, creator, however you determine what you want to define that is, I am going to turn my life over to you, which is love. And I make a commitment or a promise, or, when like people fellows sometimes have trouble committing to a marriage, it's a commitment. You commit your life to living from a heart-based life, a love-based life.
Mm,
And as you make that commitment, then the work begins. And you take it step by step. You look at every fear, you list all your fears, and you turn it around to how it worked against you.
mm,
Every time I saw things of how it worked against me, brought me into reality. Fear is the lack of reality, and reality's love. I didn't see through the eyes of love because there was no love in my family. My church didn't preach love. I didn't have loving friends because you attract what you are.
mm,
And when I could start seeing that I was a loved person and they were wounded people, but they were doing the best they could with the tools they had.
mm,
And I could forgive them. I could say, I'm sorry. We take responsibility for our lives. I'm sorry you played that part. Thank you for playing that part. I forgive you. And uh, I find compassion. The hardest person I had to forgive and identify with all the fear that came in and so forth was my stepdad, and it had a lot of abuse involved for years. And when I saw what a drastic, in praying for him, I saw what a drastic childhood he had. I started having compassion for him. He was a sick man. In fact, I used to call him the devil incarnate. He was dark. He was really dark, and he put it off on me through abuse. And it took a long time, but when you look at yourself, when you have one finger pointing out and three fingers pointing back, he's not the problem, I am.
Mm.
I bought his abuse hook, line, and sinker, and it wasn't even me, it was his problem. When I can do that with every part of my fears, guilt, shame, and judgment, it's always, did I react in fear or did I respond in love? And so today, it's called the Hono'ono prayer. It's a Hawaiian prayer. Look it up on the internet. It works wonders to change your head and
Mm.
your attitude and how you handle life, because instead of causing or thinking everybody else is your problem, you've been the problem the whole time.
Mm.
And as you look at each and every one, write it out. The book shows you how to do that. And then take a look at it, where is my part of the situation? And today I see it through how they had their lives were arranged for me to learn those lessons. They were my teachers. And I can get as angry as I want, but they were actually making me a better person. Having come through this situation, I become a stronger person.
Mm.
And that's called growing up.
Mm.
I was still 3 years old and I'm growing up because I'm taking responsibility instead of reacting in fear.
Yes. Wow. Well, Marilyn, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with me today, offer all of your experiences, wisdom, advice, and knowledge. It's always so inspiring and such a pleasure to speak with you. Truly,
Well,
thank you.
I love sharing that it is possible. Today, I feel like I'm in grace.
Mm.
And today, I don't have to overreact. I've had several things come up in the last scams, for everybody knows about scams.
Yeah.
I had a big one come up recently and I didn't overreact, and there were thousands of dollars involved. And I had just a simple little lifetime situation show up recently on the internet. I bought something and it went blue key, and
Mm.
I didn't react. I'm learning everything is neutral,
Yes.
and I can make it wrong. I can make it scary. I can make it poor me, poor me, poor me.
Hmm.
I learned that from my mother.
Mm.
Or I can see the lessons I've learned from it.
Mm.
And as I learn the lessons, it's not a problem anymore. It just plain disappears. And I've grown another, as in the Bible, it says the Jacob's ladder, but I've grown another step up into maturity. We're all growing into maturity at different levels in different ways. Everybody has their own lessons. God bless them. They're doing the best they can. And I've learned tolerance.
Mm.
Live and let live. Let them have their lives. If they want to stay toxic, God bless them.
Hmm.
My ex did that. If they want to grow, I just got off the phone with my grandson a few minutes ago, and we had a wonderful talk because he's trying to grow out of all this stuff we're talking about.
Right.
And he says, "Thank you, Grandma," and so I can help those that want help. And if they don't, God bless them. You live your life, I'm living mine. And I don't have to buy into your craziness.
Exactly. Ugh, what a great way to end off. I really appreciate that. And I also want to emphasize, for everyone at home, you mentioned your book. We'll definitely have a link to that book in the description. I highly recommend everyone check that out. And also for everyone watching, if you want to watch our original episode with Marilyn and read our article with her, you can click the links in the description as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Eric Mastrota, and this has been Their Journey, a sit down with the National Digest. Take care, everybody.